Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Rachna Shroff. I'm the Chief of GI Medical Oncology at the University of Arizona Cancer Center, and I'm delighted to be with everybody again this year as we move through the annual conference for the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation and celebrate 15 years. I am excited to speak today about the impact of what I lovingly call the GAP study, which is SWOG 1815, the GemCis nab-paclitaxel study, and what we hope will be its legacy. I think we all know that it has been a very long decade plus. The ABC02 study, which cemented gemcitabine and cisplatin as our new gold standard of care for advanced biliary tract cancers, was published in the New England Journal in 2010 by Dr. Wanvaye and colleagues. And as we know very well, the median overall survival was improved with the addition of cisplatin to gemcitabine, but there was still a lot left to be desired with the median OS of 11.7 months. The ABC group has been incredible in terms of productivity and really moving the needle forward in this space. They have set benchmarks for this disease between ABC02, BILCAP, which is the adjuvant data supporting the use of capecitabine after surgical resection of biliary tract cancers, and ABC06, which set the new standard of care in the second-line setting after gemcitabine-based therapy with FOLFOX. But of course, the question always remains, will anything ever dethrone gemcitabine and cisplatin? Multiple studies have tried so far, but we still have a leading king. So the GAP study, just to put this into context, this study actually was germinated out of a single-arm phase 2 trial that was conducted at MD Anderson Cancer Center and Mayo Clinic, Arizona. This was a study for newly diagnosed biliary tract cancer patients with advanced cholangiocarcinoma or gallbladder cancer. A total of 60 patients were enrolled, and all 60 patients received a triplet chemotherapy regimen of gemcitabine and cisplatin with the addition of nab-paclitaxel or albumin-bound paclitaxel. This is a drug that has been FDA approved in multiple other tumor types, including pancreas cancer. The primary endpoint of this study was progression-free survival, and we also looked at things like overall response rate and overall survival. The intent was to improve PFS from 8 to 10 months. So this was the data that was published, and a lot of us have seen this data over and over again, so I'm not going to belabor it. This was a study that showed real-world the types of patients that are going on biliary tract cancer trials nowadays. This study had primarily intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma, which is a slight shift in terms of what we saw in the ABC02 study. And this study also had a primarily metastatic patient population. So here, when we look, the median PFS in this patient population was 11.8 months. So we thought this was a positive study based on our null hypothesis. And the median overall survival was really what caught our attention, with a median OS of 19.2 months and a somewhat impressive overall response rate of 45%. Impressively, 12 out of 60 patients, or 20% of patients, were told that they did not have resectable or potentially curative disease, and they were converted from unresectable and taken for a curative resection, with 2 patients having a pathologic complete response. And as you can see here from this waterfall plot, the majority of patients had some sort of benefit from the triplet regimen. Based on this data, actually, the NCTN guidelines in April of 2020 were updated to include the triplet regimen, albeit with a Category 2B recommendation, as an option for our patients. But obviously, how do we know if this is truly better than the king? Randomized phase 3 studies. So we proposed a study to SWOG, the Southwest Oncology Group. The study garnered immediate support at the SWOG GI committee with the support and help of Drs. Javle, El-Khoueiry, Hochster, a number of other players. The NCI Hepatobiliary Task Force also said, yes, we absolutely need a randomized phase 3 study here to understand the utility of the triplet. So they threw their support in the ring with the support of our leadership from the task force, Drs. Abu Alfa and Knox, and now subsequently Bakai, Saab, and Javle, in addition to patient advocates who were strong proponents for this study. The GI steering committee at the level of the NCI helped us flesh out some important questions so that we could really have the strongest study design possible. And I cannot thank those GI thought leaders and advocates enough for their help with this. But then we hit some roadblocks. So concerns were raised at the level of NCI CTEP. The first real question was, you want to do a 400-patient study in the United States of biliary tract cancers? Can you really accrue that many patients in this study? Additionally, this is a triplet chemotherapy. So given concerns with toxicity, should we not set a really high bar, a hazard ratio that was, in my opinion, super high, to make sure that this added toxicity was truly worth it clinically? There was also some doubts that all NCTN groups were committed to this. And I think their biggest question was, well, there's no precedent for this in this country and then in this disease. How much buy-in do you have from this community? Well, I have to be honest, I am somebody who takes things like that and says, challenge accepted. So the first thing we did was educated them. We reminded them about the power and the impact of the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation, which was established, still young, but established and known to be a huge proponent for this disease. And then we reminded them about how, by coming together as a community, we learned about the impact of molecular alterations and biomarker testing for this disease, as evidenced, as shown in this publication here by Dr. Javle, but what was actually really a multi-center collaboration. And we reminded them about how even in a rare tumor with a rare alteration like FGFR2 fusions, the first initial data with, say, infigratinib, an oral FGFR inhibitor, was published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology in 2017, but actually in this rare subset of a, quote, rare tumor, was accrued incredibly rapidly in 18 months. So we had to do a little bit of education. And then when they still said, can you do it? We said, watch me. We definitely were determined, and we knew we had the support of the community. So S1815, SWOG 1815 was designed. This was going to be a randomized phase 3 study, including all biliary tract malignancies, cholangiocarcinoma and gallbladder cancer who were newly diagnosed, randomized 2-to-1 to gemcitabine, cisplatin, and nab-paclitaxel versus gemcitabine and cisplatin. Our plan was for a 400-patient study. The NCI wanted a smaller study. They were worried about accrual. So they had a total planned N of 268 patients and a very high target hazard ratio. The precedent in this disease had always been a target hazard ratio of 0.7. That is what we were looking to do, but they really wanted a higher bar. The plan was for blood and tissue to be collected, both archival and then prospective blood collection as well. So then, of course, there was the question of, but it's the NCTN. These things move at glacial paces. Can you really open a study quickly and answer a question quickly through the NCTN? When you say you can't open a study quickly through the NCTN, I'm going to use this study moving forward to people and say, well, I think that's hogwash. Because the honest truth is that the capsule summary, which is the first step, was approved in December of 2017. And when you look here, the activation date was 1 year later. So from an initial concept through writing a protocol, having it submitted to the NCI, having it approved, and having it open, we could do this as quickly as we wanted to. So the stage was set. SWOG 1815 was ready to open. It was going to be a randomized phase 3, and it was going to be Gem-Cis versus Gem-Cis nab-paclitaxel. So the age-old lip sync battle between Dr. Valle and myself was ready to go. And let me tell you that we were determined to be swift. There was a concern that we would not be able to accrue quickly. The target accrual per month is shown here in the dotted line, 8 patients per month. And sure, we got off to a little slow start. But as you can see, there was no concern about accruing to this study quickly and across the country. And in fact, by February of 2020, we ended up having a conversation with NCI leadership because we were basically about to accrue the 268. So we had done it in a year. And by showing that to them, by showing the commitment of this community and the determination of the investigators, we were able to say, I think you were wrong. Now can we look at this study again? Can we reset a hazard ratio that is probably a little bit more in line with prior studies in this disease? And can we continue to enroll patients? Because clearly there's a need. And so SWOG 1815 was closed, was revised. It was paused. That's what that drop in accrual was. It was paused, it was amended, and the N was increased to 441 patients with a target hazard ratio of 0.7. We paused from February and reopened in June of 2020. to be able to amend the study. Keep in mind, this was in the middle of COVID setting in. And the study reopened in June of 2020, and we closed this study to accrual, having accrued over 441 patients. It was 452 by February 15th of 2021. Again, in the middle of a global pandemic, this study continued to accrue swiftly and rapidly. And this is just a graphic to show that, oh my gosh, did it take a village? The top accruing sites are listed here. You can see some of the big centers, as we would expect, immense support from people that are in this room watching this conference as we speak. Dr. Javle, of course, was one of our top accruers, but we had leadership from Memorial Sloan Kettering, Dana-Farber, Roswell Park, and you can see that all of these institutions were just the top accruing sites, and there were so many others that contributed to the success of this story. You can also see that every single group, they were worried about the buy-in from each cooperative group. Every single group contributed to this study. SWOG is the largest part of this pie chart, but as you can see, ECOG Alliance, ECOG Akron, and NRG all played an important role in getting this study done. And importantly, right at the same time that the study closed to accrual, we had a planned first interim analysis at 40% of events. The DSMC for SWOG reviewed this study and felt that the study should continue as planned. No safety signals, and we did not meet our bar for futility. So this is very exciting. The study is continuing to be followed for events so that we can get a continued readout, and another interim analysis is planned at 70%. And importantly, the other part of this is that there's a lot of work to be done in the meanwhile. This is just a snapshot in time of the tissue and the blood that has been collected. And as you can see, there are an enormous amount of biospecimens that have been prospectively collected for this study. And there are so many questions we can ask. Dr. El-Khoury and I have had some fun discussing some potential translational questions, and we welcome this community to tell us what your questions are. What can we learn from this study? So I think that we have changed the landscape of this disease. I think GAP has absolutely proven that, but we have proven it can be done by so many other studies. And these are just some examples of studies that read out in the course of the GAP story. This, of course, is the infigratinib waterfall plot that was presented at GI ASCO. This is the final PFS data for the CLARITY study with ivosidenib that was presented at ESMO. And this is the publication of pemigatinib that led to the FDA approval of a drug for this disease. So GAP for all, doubtful. But I think that this study is teaching us that we can be smarter. And if we're going to be using it in the future, trying to figure out the right patient population to use it in. There's been a lot of interest in using it in the neoadjuvant space, and Dr. Maithal is leading a study that's a multi-center study looking at neoadjuvant GAP for a high-risk intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma patients. We have seen even in SWOG 1815 that patients are being downstaged and taken to surgery. Can we use this as that mechanism? Obviously, this should be in good performance status advanced patients, but clearly not all triplets are the same, as we saw with the readout of the FOLFIRINOX versus GemCis study that was presented at ESMO last year, where it did not seem that FOLFIRINOX added anything and that GemCis really could kind of stay as the frontline regimen. And I think regardless, it's safe to say that GemCis is not going anywhere and is going to be an important part of our treatment armamentarium moving forward. But what will GAP's legacy be? Well, I think there's some really important things that we will learn from SWOG 1815. First of all, we will get an updated real-world understanding of where we are with biliary tract cancers, because not only will we have a median overall survival of GemCis nab-paclitaxel, we will have a new, decade later, median overall survival for GemCis. And we will know how we are doing in terms of this, and it can be used as the new bar, if you will. We will learn from the biospecimens, regardless of the winner. There's not a doubt in my mind that we can leverage that repository to understand this disease, understand these treatments, and understand where to go next. I think there are clearly patients who can safely tolerate a triplet chemotherapy. I think we've seen that already from the enrollment. And I think that the role of GAP in the perioperative downstaging space, what we're learning is it's worth exploring. But in my opinion, most importantly, I think what we have answered is that we can do a randomized phase 3 trial in biliary tract cancers in the United States and answer clinically meaningful questions quickly. And we can do this because of this community of patients, advocates, and researchers. So I do not doubt that we are closing the gap. I just think we have to keep charging forward. Thank you so much. Thank you to every single person that contributed to SWOG 1815, to the original phase 2, and thank you to all of the patients that participated in this trial.